Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Nation's Pastime in the nation's capital. I'm your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my coach, James Higgins, and we have an exciting show planned for you tonight. Just coming off the heels of the reveal of the All-Star Game starters for both the American League and the National League. We're going to go over all of them, give our thoughts on the picks, whether or not they were correct, since, of course, we still do have what seems to be the popular vote method, James. Is not the case.
Yeah, we have a new voting system now in Major League Baseball with the All-Star Game. Interesting new results. Some guys who were leading after the first round didn't end up being the starters after this second round of voting, and it led to some interesting decisions, especially in the National League.
Yeah, a couple really cool picks in the National League, some other ones as well in the American. We'll talk all about that in a second. But before we get into that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Nation's Pastime and Nation's Capital. Go ahead and follow our Twitter, as we say every episode, for all of the updates regarding the show, when it's posted, all that good stuff. That's at Nat Pastime Cap. And also, as always, if you have any questions you want to ask on the show, you can either send a voicemail or send it in text form, and we will talk about it on the show either way, directly to our DMs on Twitter. Send us an email, natpastimecapital@gmail.com. Whatever's most convenient for you. We'd love to get your questions on the show and talk about them in these podcast-based episodes. With that said, let's jump right into those American and National League All-Star starters that have been revealed. James, I'm going to ask you right off the bat, is there one player that you think it was a surprise pick to be a starter?
Like from my expectations going into the season or from the last round of voting?
I'd say from going into the season, because if we're going off of that, I think there's a lot of surprises.
Yeah, Adam Frazier.
Absolutely.
Adam Frazier absolutely deserves this All-Star Game start after what he's done in the first half. Obviously, it's been a woeful first half for the Pittsburgh Pirates, as we seem to say every single year. But Adam Frazier's really put it all together, and he's done a tremendous job at the top of the order, along with Brian Reynolds. Frazier on the season is hitting .327. The power is not there. He's not a power guy. He's only got 4 bombs and 28 RBIs. He's got 864 OPS, but he's getting on base. He's getting on base. He's setting the table at the top of the order. He's been incredibly productive for the Pirates. At the top of the order, he's got 101 hits on the season. He's got 145 total bases to go along with 24 doubles. So he's having a career year. He's doing it at the right time. He's going to be a valuable trade chip for a contender at the deadline. And I think he's the guy who's most deserving of the start and the biggest surprise in a good way.
Yeah, not exactly a starter here, but Adam Frazier, talking about him being potentially traded, reminds me of another person who is going to be featured in this All-Star game and then might be wearing a different uniform a week later. And that, of course, is Trevor Story, who was announced that he's going to be in the Home Run Derby.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. You have the hometown guy in the Home Run Derby. Hopefully he'll put on a show. I think everyone who's doing it in Colorado will put on a show given the altitude there. But it's great to see Story at least doing the Home Run Derby, probably because he's not going to make the All-Star team this year. And this is a similar situation to Manny Machado. He'll be traded very soon after the All-Star game.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, in 2018 at the All-Star game in Washington, D.C., everyone was on Twitter the entire game wondering where Manny Machado was going to be traded. It might have been we were hearing the Brewers, we were hearing the Phillies, and ended up halfway through that game finding out that he was indeed going to be an L.A. Dodger right after that game. And it turned out that was the last time he wore a Baltimore Orioles uniform. Might be the case with Trevor Story and Adam Frazier here as well. Going back to another one of the surprise picks for starters, I got to give it to the American League second baseman, Marcus Semien, having a fantastic year for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Absolutely. When you look at Semien, he bet on himself taking a 1-year deal with Toronto. I don't think a lot of people expect him to take a 1-year deal. I think most people expect him to either re-up with Oakland or take another shorter multi-year deal and hit the market again in a few years, especially when the market resets after the new CBA. But Semien wanted to hit the market again in 2021 because if you look at what Semien did in 2019, he was top 3 in MVP voting. And he had a phenomenal year for Oakland. They won 96 games. They ultimately lost in the wild card game. But he was a key cog and a key contributor in the middle of that offense. And he had a very down year in 2020. He didn't play up to his stand, something that he was proud of, obviously. But 2020 was a wash for a lot of guys. And you saw there were a lot of stars who didn't have a productive year in 2020. And when you look at Semien in 2021, he signed a 1-year, $18 million deal with Toronto. He's been phenomenal. And he's been exactly what they needed at the top of the order, especially with George Springer not playing that much this year. He's only played in 10 games. Semien on the year this season, he's played in 79 games. He's had a brief he's just had a few days off, obviously, for rest, but he's played in 79 games. He has 94 hits on the year to go along with 21 doubles, 20 bombs, 52 RBIs. He's got 10 stolen bases. He's hitting 291 with a 904 OPS. So when you think about the Blue Jays, you think about Vladdy Jr., you think about Bo Bichette, you think about George Springer, you think about Kevin Biggio, but Marcus Semien has probably been their biggest offensive producer outside of Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Oh, without question. And like you
And
said,
he's also turned himself into an elite defender at a different position. He was a shortstop in Oakland. Now he's doing it.
yeah, making himself even more valuable. Like you said, betting on himself, really taking a risk there. It looks like it's paying off. If he can stay healthy and continue to do this in the second half of the year, you're looking at a pretty big deal for a guy who can play, technically speaking, second short or third, I'm sure if they need him to. Very
Yeah,
valuable indeed.
yeah. Whether it's someone else, he's going to get a big payday this offseason, without a doubt.
Talk about another guy who had a down year last year. Seems like there was a lot of them, but then being an All-Star game starter this year. How about Nick Castellanos? Absolutely tearing it up in 2021 for the Cincinnati Reds after batting only 225 last year. He has been simply remarkable, along with another fellow Cincinnati Red who's going to be starting in that National League outfield, Jesse Winker, who has been just the same, if not better. They've been absolutely remarkable for a Cincinnati Reds team that seems to be hovering around mediocrity right now.
Yeah, when you look at Winker and Castellanos, these are both guys who deserve the All-Star game start. And when you look at Castellanos last year, he started the first 2 or 3 weeks of the shortened season last year red hot. He was right up there with Tatis and Mookie and Freeman for the MVP discussion, and he fell off considerably. But this year, he started the year on a rampage, and he has not stopped. He has a 2.6 WAR in the year. He's hitting 346 with 16 bombs, 53 RBIs, and a 10.02 OPS, right in the middle of a potent Cincinnati Reds lineup. And he right now, I would say the top three in NL MVP consideration are DeGrom, Tatis, and Castellanos. Castellanos has been stellar all year. The 4-year, $64 million deal Cincinnati signed him to before the 2020 season is looking like a bargain, because if he were hitting the open market after this offseason, he would be getting a giant payday. Castellanos, he was a top prospect with Detroit. He didn't fully live up to expectations there. He's finally putting it all together, living up to expectations, and he really is one of the most complete hitters in all of baseball this year. Now to the other side of the Cincinnati Reds outfield, Jesse Winker, a guy who's having another phenomenal season for them. He's hitting 325 with 48 RBIs, 19 home runs, and an even 1,000 OPS. So two guys in the middle of the Reds order who are producing at the highest level and have put up some of the best numbers across the National League the entire season.
Without question, another National League outfielder that we have to mention here, of course, only a starter is being announced tonight, so still a chance for him to make it out as a reserve, but one who has been red hot. I know James talked about him last week, and we can't have another show without talking about some of the crazy stats he put up in June. That, of course, is the Washington Nationals' Kyle Schwarber. The man has been on a mission at the plate the past month of June. In case you're not aware, Kyle Schwarber, since June 12th, had 16 home runs this is of June 29th, and I'm reading this tweet from the Washington Nationals. At that time, he had as many home runs as the entire Mets, the entire Tigers, and had more home runs than the Marlins, Royals, Phillies, Reds, Pirates, Cardinals, D-backs, and White Sox. James, honestly, I know you made your pitch last week, but it seems like he pretty much needs to be a reserve on this All-Star team.
If Kyle Schwarber's not a reserve on the All-Star team, I've lost all faith in humanity. Kyle Schwarber we have not seen a run like this since Barry Bonds or Sammy Sosa. Schwarber was tied for the second most home runs in any June in MLB history, only trailing Sosa in 98. And we genuinely hot over this period of time since prime Barry Bonds. I mean, what Schwarber did since June 12th to the end of June, imagine if he did this all of June, what his numbers would be like for the whole month. But the entirety of June, he had 100 at-bats and 27 games, 8 hits, 16 of which were home runs. He scored 22 runs, had 30 RBIs, and he hit 280 in the month of June. Bringing his season average up to 252, bringing his OPS up from the mid 700s to above 900, a 150-point increase overall in his overall OPS. And his OPS for the month of June was 1122. So just an absurd month of June for Kyle Schwarber. He slugged 760. Again, there has not been a hitter that has been this hot since prime Barry Bonds. And 16 home runs in 18 games. That is the most home runs over any 18 game span in Major League Baseball history. What he did was historic. It was red hot. It's something that you very rarely see and should be greatly appreciated. And 7 of those home runs were leadoff home runs to begin the game. It seemed like every night when you turned on the TV to watch the Nats, he had the ability to do something special.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice when I saw they were deciding to go ahead and lead him off, a guy who's never really been known as a high batting average type player, career 233 hitter. But I got to say, it's worked out. He's had a lot of the pop at the top of the order, and I know this seems to be a trend across baseball where guys are managers are putting their guys up there who maybe aren't traditional leadoff hitters. And in case of the Washington Nationals, it's not only paid off in the fact that Kyle Schwarber's been good, but the team's been on a little bit of a run as well.
Yeah, they're 14-3 in their last 17. They've gone from 9.5 out to now only 2 back in the NL East with a 40-38 record. Gone to 2 games above 500. They're right in the thick of it in a division that's there for the taking. And we saw them go on a similar run in 2019. They could very well have another run in them and become a legit threat if they get to October, because with Scherzer and if Strasburg comes back healthy and the offense of of Schwarber, Turner, and Soto, that's not a team that you want to see in a shortened series in October.
No, without question, you don't. A team that I want to look at here in relation to Kyle Schwarber that I think is an interesting take on the situation, the Chicago Cubs. Now, James, when the 2021 started, the Cubs had traded their ace. They non-tendered Kyle Schwarber, and there wasn't a whole lot of expectations. I mean, they were fielding offers on guys like Bryant, Baez, Rizzo, who are all impending free agents. And, you look and see what Kyle Schwarber is doing. You look and see what Darvish is doing, and you think, wow, the Cubs are probably really upset right now, but the Cubs are doing good. And
Yeah,
I think it's just absolutely remarkable the fact that they essentially were fine with being a mediocre team this year, and they're hanging right in there in the NL Central race.
for sure. I mean, I was reading an article the other day saying the Cubs should trade for Kyle Schwarber. Well, I mean, you had 8 million. You had 8 million reasons to. I mean, he gave you 8 million reasons to keep him, and obviously you didn't keep him for that reason. But I mean, with the Cubs, they really turned it on in May after a mediocre April. They really turned it on in May, and so far in June, it's been kind of similar to what they were in April. They started off hot at the beginning of June. That from what carried over to the end of May, but now they seem to have reverted back to the mean. And you really don't know what team you're getting. Right now, they sit at 42-39. They're on a 6-game losing streak, and they're 6 games back of the Brewers, who have won 8 straight in the NL Central. And Chris Bryant, ever since being hit in the hand, has not been the same. His average has dropped almost 30 points. Baez has turned it up, but at a certain point, is it too little, too late? Especially with the way the team is on the losing streak, they don't have a true bona fide ace because of the Darvish trade. Cubs will hang around and be in contention, but will they make the playoffs? That's a big question, because it seems like the two out West. The big question is going to be, will they trade their guys? Will they trade Bryant, or will they try to sign him this offseason? There's a lot of speculation around the Cubs, and I think they're going to be the team to watch going forward throughout July, because I think if they do end up selling, that's going to be the biggest team who would provide the most pieces for a contender, obviously, a la Bryant or Baez, or even potentially Rizzo, if they were to trade any one of those 3 guys.
Without question, a lot of interesting teams to watch and players to watch at the deadline. The Cubs are going to be number one. I agree. What they do and what they decide to do with their players could easily determine who's not only going to make the playoffs, but could potentially win the World Series.
Right, and that could also, I think, shape the market for Trevor Story as well, because if Baez is on the trading block, that's going to open up more teams who need a shortstop, and both the Rockies and the Cubs can leverage themselves to get a higher price for Story and for Baez.
I know I've been hearing a lot about Trevor Story being a perfect fit for the Athletics. Do you buy into that?
Look, Billy Beane loves to make the big move. I mean, he made the big move for John Lester a few years ago. He's not afraid to make it. He's not afraid to give up prospects and to go for it all. And especially in an American league that's wide open this year, you have the Red Sox, who are 51-31, who have the best record in the AL. You have the White Sox, and obviously you have Houston, but Oakland is right there. And I would say between those 4 teams, and yes, of course, Tampa Bay, who's 47-34, but they've really fallen off. They're 4-9 since the Tyler Glasnow injury. We'll see how long that continues to affect them. But between those 5 teams, it really seems like it's those 5 teams, and that's it in the American League in terms of legit contenders. If Trevor Story is the difference between them winning the American League and not, they better go out and do it.
I agree, and I agree with that as well. Billy Beane, definitely one of the guys to go ahead and just pull the trigger. Like you said, he's done it in the past, and if he has to say there in Oakland, I'm sure he will do it again given the opportunity. A big name at the deadline that I want to watch, though, that I think could have a huge impact on any team that acquires him, a guy who's been stellar this year, a guy who has 3 more years of team control. That's the Pittsburgh Pirates closer, Richard Rodriguez. How good has this guy been, James?
He's been unbelievable. When you talk about biggest surprises, look, the Pittsburgh Pirates, they are nothing to be they should not be talked about in a positive light normally. They're not exactly a model for success. There's not a lot of bright spots in Pittsburgh right now. They sit in last place in the Central at 29-50, and they're 18 games back of Milwaukee, which is 21 games under 500. But
Yeah.
they could potentially have 3 All-Stars. Obviously, Frazier is one. Brian Reynolds, who's had a phenomenal year at the top of their order, could be another. And then, of course, you get to Richard Rodriguez, who is very, very deserving of an All-Star spot this year. He has a 1.78 ERA and 30 and a third innings pitched. He's only struck out 27. He has 10 saves, and he has a win-loss record of 3-1. He's done it all at the back end of the bullpen, and I think he only has 10 saves because the Pirates don't win many baseball games. If he was on a contending team, he would have a lot more saves. But whether he makes the All-Star team or not, he's going to be a valuable trade asset for whoever needs him. And when you look at teams in contention that could use him, obviously every year, every team could use a bullpen arm. But when it really gets down to it, I think a team that could really use him is a team in the NL West, whether it's the Dodgers, the Giants, or the Padres. All need bullpen help, and one bullpen arm could really be the difference between winning that division or being in the one-game wildcard playoff.
I mean, hey, you want to talk about it? That's 3 teams right there battling in the division. It could be whoever gets that arm like Richard Rodriguez wins that division. And, if you're the Pirates, I mean, I'm licking my chops right now. You got 3 of the biggest teams out there just, pretty much just trying to outbid each other for the remainder of Richard Rodriguez's season in the next 3
and
contracts.
the Pirates can get so much for all of their trade assets. It depends how much Ben Cherington wants to part with, but they can get a lot and really accelerate that rebuild, especially with them having the number 1 pick in this draft. I think once the draft ends, that'll really accelerate everything in terms of trade talks, because I think teams want to make their picks first before they're really set on who to get back from certain teams. But look, if you're the Dodgers, can you finally make a trade with the Pirates for a reliever? Hindsight being 2020, of course, it's a good thing that they didn't trade for Felipe Vasquez, but in 2018 and 2019, I think everyone wanted them to, because everyone knew that was the difference maker between them potentially making the World Series or not. So can the Dodgers just wake up, part with some prospects, and make this trade in order to bolster their bullpen?
Yeah, that's a very good point indeed. Of course, hindsight, probably good that they did not do that. But I
I'm
agree.
just saying, like the point remains, like at a certain point, like you just gotta. The Dodgers are always going to be prospect rich and prospect heavy. At a certain point, go out and make the move. The Dodgers always need bullpen depth. Kenley Jansen is back to his old self, but you don't know how long it's going to last. Treinen has had a solid season, but he's been inconsistent at times. You have a very good starting rotation, but if you have this team, if you're the Dodgers, why not go for it? Like, you're in a dogfight that you didn't expect to be in with the Giants. Why not go for it, separate yourself from the pack further, and just go get the best overall record in the National League?
Yeah, and again, you want to look at this from the Pirates side. It's going to be a matter of, if they do accelerate their rebuild, it's going to be a matter of if they make a trade like, the Glasnow Meadows trade, or if it's going to be one that's actually, well researched or whatever it may be. I mean,
just like the Brian Reynolds trade that's what they got back from McCutchen.
Right.
That was the centerpiece.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
More of a Brian Reynolds trade instead. And that's what's going to be determining of whether or not you see this rebuild accelerate, because we're going on 4 years of just absolutely nothing to watch in Pittsburgh.
24 years.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, at some point, you got to think, all right, look, we got to start shaking it up here. We got to figure out something to at least become competitive again in NL Central. And by the way, in an NL Central that every year seems to be very winnable.
Yes, like if the Pirates were to accelerate their rebuild, keep the right guys and make the right trades, in 4 years, they could probably be in contention. I know a lot can happen in 4 years, but look, the Pirates will always have a chance at some point to. It seems like they'll always have a chance to restart that rebuild and get going, but at a certain point, things are going to click because they'll get the right guys in there and they'll be contenders. It just depends if they're willing to spend on people. Their owner is terrible, but.
Yeah, I think that's quite the understatement there, but absolutely would agree with that. At least they play in an absolutely beautiful ballpark, isn't that right?
For sure. That the PNC Park is beautiful, but Bob Nutting, please sell the team to someone competent.
Please sell the team to someone that likes baseball. Am I right?
Yes.
Absolutely, though. There's going to be a lot of trade pieces to watch at the deadline. We're going to
and another team that's going to be active, the New York Yankees.
Yeah, and that was exactly actually what I was about to say. Another team what are you going to do?
I couldn't resist not talking about the Yankees. I'm sorry.
Well, no, and it's not even like some sort of bias here. You almost have to after what's been going on in New York. You have a team in New York that we've said so many times this year on this show that has no excuses. We've had Robbie say on the show, no excuses to not win the AL. No excuses. The payroll loaded with talent. Yet for some reason, James, they just can't do it. They can't win. Of course, there's a long season still ahead of them, and they're over 500. But there's two teams in that division that are basically running away with it at this point.
Yeah, and then Toronto is only a half game above them, but right now I think most people would consider Toronto better than New York. I know only a half game separates them in the standings, but if you had to pick one to go on a run, I think most people right now would pick Toronto over New York. The Yankees have been very inconsistent all season, especially offensively. You know, obviously they have the vaunted Bronx Bombers nickname. Well, their biggest problem, they're not hitting the ball out of the ballpark. They're not hitting the ball, period, but they really are not hitting the ball out of the ballpark. They're not scoring runs, and outside of Garrett Cole, their starting rotation is very suspect. And now without Spider Tack, and look, obviously Garrett Cole is still a very good pitcher without Spider Tack, but how much of his dominance is going to tail off because he doesn't have Spider Tack. Look, in June, since the memos come out, he has a 4.65 ERA. Like, the facts are there. Garrett Cole is still an elite pitcher, but in the first month without Spider Tack, well, he had to adjust on the fly. He had a 4.65 ERA. The proof is in the pudding. There's going to be adjustments that are going to need to be made, not just by him, but by every pitcher who's not using it, because every pitcher in Major League Baseball outside of Jacob deGrom was using something. But Garrett Cole is going to have to adjust and carry that Yankees rotation. Perfect example. At Fenway Park last week, the Red Sox were on the verge of sweeping the Yankees, but they sent Garrett Cole to the mound. And he, you pay a guy $324 million, he better be able to go out and shove against your biggest rival and prevent a sweep. That didn't happen. He gave up 5 earned runs in 5 innings, 6 runs overall, and the Yankees lost and got swept at Fenway Park by the Red Sox. You have to figure out soon you have to carry this team. Offensively, besides Judge, guys have just not consistently been hitting the ball. DJ LeMahieu is only in the first year of that deal, but it looks like an awful extension right now. He's got an OPS just above 700, but it's barely above 700. Giancarlo Stanton can't stay on the field. The Aaron Hicks extension looks awful. Clint Frazier, they should have traded him 3 years ago because he doesn't look like he can hit the ball at all. I don't know why Brett Gardner gets regular playing time. And look, this is not me complaining about it because I'm absolutely relishing every moment of this, but you have to wonder what is going to save them, and if anything can save them. They acquired Tim LeCastro from Arizona today for a AA prospect. Obviously, Tim LeCastro is not going to save them. It's not going to be the only move they make. But you would have to think at the end of the year, both Boone and Cashman are gone because they've both been there way too long, especially Brian Cashman, for this mediocrity to continue. And by mediocrity, I mean not winning a World Series. They haven't won a World Series since 2009. And if you're the Yankees, that's way too long for the standards that franchise has had for so many years.
Well, yeah, and especially like you're saying with LeMahieu and Cole there, these are moves that not only Yankee fans, but I'm sure front management as well, were convinced these are moves we have to make sure we are staying at the same level, and in the case of Garrett Cole, advancing to the next level and being, without a doubt, World Series contenders. They made the moves, and they're just not looking like they're working out right now. And honestly, like you said, they haven't even won. They haven't been to a World Series since 2009.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. If you're the Yankees, that is just absolutely unacceptable. And I think it just boils back down to no excuse. There was
quite simply, they're not a good baseball team, and that's
they're not.
There's no bias there. They are not a good objectively. They're not a good baseball team, and Yankees fans should probably go invest their time in something else for the summer because it's if you're a Yankees fan, it's not worth watching the Yankees, and especially look at what happened last night. They were upset. They scored 7 runs off Shohei Ohtani. They were up 7-2. Then they were up 8-4 going into the ninth with the Aroldis Chapman on the mound, and he blew it. Jared Walsh with a game-tying grand slam, and the Angels came back to win. But another guy who's Aroldis Chapman is the highest whip among qualified relievers since the sticky stuff memo came out.
Are you kidding me? I didn't know that. Wow.
And he is not the highest qualified ERA, although he might be after last night. But going into last night, he had the highest whip among qualified American League relievers. His fastball has lost 2 miles an hour. The RPM has gone down. The RPM has gone down on the breaking ball. He's lost 1 mile an hour on the breaking ball. He has suffered from this, and not a lot of people are noticing that. But it's the truth. If the numbers don't lie. That's the one thing about all this stuff. The numbers do not lie.
They absolutely do not. And James, I'm going to ask you real quick. Let's say, hypothetically, you are Brian Cashman. What are you doing at this deadline?
And I can trade whoever I want. There's no ownership restrictions to go over the luxury tax. Like,
you can do whatever you want. I'm just saying, I'm trying to make a point that it seems like you're out of one of the toughest decisions of any general manager in baseball this season.
Look, if I'm Brian Cashman, I'm trying to save my job. So I'm going to get Chris Bryant or Trevor Story. I'm going to get Richard Rodriguez. I'm going to get Brian Reynolds. Whoever's available, and go as far over the luxury tax as you need to. That's just a crazy hypothetical. Like that, obviously that stuff's not going to happen, but the Yankees need something drastic to happen. They need something drastic to happen soon, and they can't afford to wait around much longer. Obviously, they play the Red Sox 8 times in the first 12 games coming out of the All-Star break, and that could really make or break their season. 4 games in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium right after the All-Star break, then a 3-game series, then 4 more games the next weekend at Fenway. So, look, the Red Sox have gone 6-0 against them this year, and the Yankees can't afford to go worse, I think, than 4-4 in those 8 games, or that could really make or break their season.
That could legitimately be the deciding factor for the division winner there. Yeah.
Right. And if the Red Sox just go 500 in those games, they're 10-4 on the season against the Yankees through 14 games, which is a tremendous clip for the team that has the best record in the American League. And not a lot of people expected to contend this year. All they need to do in the season series now is just continue to tread water, beat up on your division opponents, and go from there. But look, the Yankees are in a huge deficit in the American League East, and they need change to happen soon. They don't even occupy a wild card spot right now.
We play 162 games for a reason in baseball, and I think this season is really showing why that is the case with a lot of different teams throughout all of Major League Baseball, shocking and defying expectations. The Yankees, of course, in a bad way, and we talk about it every week, but I have to mention it again. How about the Giants in a good way?
Well, the best record in the National League.
And
50
who would
wins,
have thought?
29 losses. Buster Posey, Brandon Belt, Evan
Yeah,
Longoria, Brandon Crawford, everyone.
who would have thought that on July 1st of this year that not only would they be in first of the NL West, but have the best record in the National League at 50-29. It's just remarkable what's going on in San Francisco. I had to check the calendar the other day to make sure that it wasn't an even year, and it's not. It's not an
Yeah.
even year. So where's this coming from? Did it
Kevin
reset now
Gossman,
in the
baby.
in the 2020?
Yeah, look, maybe because the short in 2020, they're just carrying everything over. But if Jacob DeGrom wasn't on the planet, Kevin Gossman would be the National League Cy Young.
That's true.
It's truly
100%.
remarkable to watch him, and the pitcher's duel between he and Walker Buehler the other night, that was a phenomenal pitcher's duel, and hopefully we get something like that in the playoffs. Dodgers Giants, Gossman Buehler, Gossman Kershaw, whoever it may be. I mean, that would be a phenomenal pitcher's duel and a pitching matchup in the playoffs.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, the NOS just so much fun to watch. It seems like every single time. Well, let me rephrase that. Every single time, 3 of the 5 teams are up against each other. That it's just must-watch baseball at all times. Really didn't think it would be the Giants, including in that group with the Padres and Dodgers, but they're proving that they're not only to be reckoned with, but that they're an actual force that could win this division.
Definitely.
Yeah, and with that said, I mean, we're approaching the 30-minute mark here. We're going to keep this one a little shorter. And I mean, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up this week's episode? I know there was a lot to talk about, and we didn't have as much time.
Mike Trout was an All-Star game starter. He obviously is not playing in the game. Cedric Mullins deserves to replace him as the starter, I think, in the American League. He's having a phenomenal season and a guy who does not get talked about at all. Another Oriole, Trey Mancini. Very awesome to see him in the home run derby after what he overcame last year with his bout with cancer. Not sure if he's going to make the All-Star team or not, as obviously you have Vladdy and presumably Matt Olson taking up the other first base spot. But Trey Mancini's comeback is awesome. He will definitely win the American League Comeback Player of the Year. It's a remarkable story, not only for anyone in baseball, but just for anyone in life. You work hard, you can overcome anything. And, I think lastly, I think the guy who should be the DH in the National League for the All-Star team, obviously you can pick whoever's on the roster to be the DH outside the starters. I know he's tailed off a little bit in recent weeks, but I still think Chris Bryant should be rewarded for a lot of his first half play. I think he's had a phenomenal year. He's bounced back from a lot of injuries, and he's really still proving that he's a top 10 to 15 player in baseball, and hopefully he gets rewarded by getting that DH spot in the National League.
Absolutely. And you guys might have touched on this last week. Of course, the starting DH, to no one's surprise, Shohei Ohtani in the AL. But how about Shohei Ohtani participating in the home run derby?
That's gonna be a show, especially in Colorado.
Oh, it's going to be a show. I'm just surprised the Angels are letting him.
Look, the Angels, there's not much going for them there. They're 39-41. They're not winning that division. Why not? But just let them go at it.
Well, hey, I know they're not winning the division, but I also don't want my generational talent to, potentially get hurt in a contest that means nothing.
Very fair, but Shohei Ohtani does everything with grace, and I'm sure they've seen him take batting practice. He can flick his wrist and hit a ball 500 feet. I mean, especially in Denver, all you got to do is touch the barrel to the ball, and that ball's going 680 feet way out of the stadium. So I think Ohtani will put on a show for sure. And one more thing about the All-Star game I wanted to mention: Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers, the first shortstop and third baseman to be starting the All-Star game from the same team since A-Rod and Jeter at the old Yankee Stadium in '08 at the last All-Star game. Great honor for both those guys. It's the first All-Star game for Devers. They both have 2 of the top 10 OPSs in baseball, and they play on the same team, play on the same side of the infield, and it's great recognition for 2 guys who don't get enough attention and absolutely deserve it.
Yeah, special occasion, absolutely, for a very, very special left side of the infield there, who have been doing their due amount of damage for the Boston Red Sox, as I'm sure James can attest to.
Yep, for sure. It's been fun to watch. It's going to be a fun second half.
Going to be a fun second half indeed. We have another. I don't even know. What are we at technically? We're over 81 now at this
No,
point, right?
we're at 81 today. The Red Sox
We're
played
at
their
81
81st
today.
game
Okay.
today. Yeah, most teams play their 81st.
So I'm not crazy. We got 81 more games. Anything can happen. There's a lot of teams that need to turn it around. There's a lot of teams that need to stay hot. We'll see what happens in the second half. We're going to have, I believe, one more show before the All-Star game. Is that right?
Yeah, next week.
Yeah, we're going to have another game, another show before the All-Star game. We'll do a show post All-Star game, talk about that, all the fun stuff that's going on there. Those are always a blast to watch. A lot of fun, very laid back, very chill. Always love the players taking out their phones, taking selfies in the middle of the at-bats, stuff like that.
Yeah, except the jerseys this year. The jerseys are atrocious. Everything
Oh
else will
my
be
good
awesome.
Lord. Nike, come on. What are we doing? What are we doing? And they're going to wear them during the game.
Those should never be worn during the game. All 30 teams should be represented in their uniforms. That's the coolest part about the All-Star game.
Absolutely just disgusting. I don't even want to talk about that, but maybe we will talk about that next week because I think that deserves its own segment.
Robbie and I went off last week on it. Please feel free to go off next week.
We've already covered that. Then I would hope in my absence that someone had to talk about that hideous reveal. Oh my goodness.
Oh, they're terrible. They're terrible.
Absolutely terrible. But with that said, that's going to wrap up this edition of Nation's Pastime in the Nation's Capital. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen tonight. Once again, go ahead, follow us on Twitter at NatPastimeCap for all the show updates. Send us a DM if you have any questions you want us to talk about live, or not technically live, but during the podcast version of these shows while we are not live. And I think that is going to pretty much wrap it up. Other than that, have a fantastic rest of your evening, and thanks again for tuning in.
Happy 4th of July. Enjoy baseball. Enjoy fireworks.
Oh, yes, as well. Happy 4th of July. Happy birthday, America. Have a great weekend.